Very good, gentlemen. I believe we will get started. I see people rolling into the waiting room and being admitted. Uh, so I will introduce myself. My name for everybody is Dustin Snyder. I'm the president of the board of directors for the Red Deer and District Chamber of Commerce. And I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar on the economic panel discussion. So as we continue to welcome people, thank you for taking the time today. I'd like to recognize some of our guests as well. We have the MP for Red Deer Mountain View, Earl Dreeshen, MLA for Red Deer South, Jason Steffen. We have City of Red Deer Councilor, Diane Whitechess, Red Deer City Manager, Alan Seabrook. From the Red Deer Chamber and District Board of Directors, we have Tammy Schlamp with Speed Pro Signs. We have Susan Walker with Expedia Cruises, Kevin Wilkie with Laybon Homes, Keith McFedrin, Pivotal LLP. From our chamber ambassadors, we have Nicole Lorraine, and we also have our Lacombe Chamber of Commerce CEO, Monica Bartman. Thank you very much for joining, everybody. Thank you to the notable guests. Today, our speakers are Angus Watt, Todd Hirsch, and Minister Schweitzer, whom I will introduce in a formal matter in just a moment. I trust that everybody who ordered lunch from Meat Catering is enjoying. And how this will run, we'll have each of our presenters give a short overview, and then there will be a question and answer period after all of the presentations. We will also, I'll have Reg and myself monitoring the chat as well. If anybody would like to field some questions through that, Reg is going to help me with that as well. And then I'd encourage the panel to answer and complement from your areas of expertise. So thank you again for doing that. So firstly, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Angus Watt. Angus is committed to providing advice to get you closer to where you want to be. As a mentor, visionary, he combines study of political science, years of expertise in wealth management, and a keen eye for big picture thinking. For years, Albertans have come to trust and respect his voice as a source of information on the economy through daily radio broadcasts and on Global TV Edmonton. Angus is also committed to his community. His goal with every position he takes on is to strengthen the organization and improve the path for incoming leaders. Included in his current and past commitments to the community are the CN Community Board, a current director, and Angus, I'm just going to highlight a few because there's so much that you do for your community. The Alberta Order of Excellence Chair, also with the Edmonton Police Foundation, founding member and chair. He is a past recipient of the Paul Harris Fellow awarded by the Rotary Club of Canada. In 2012, Angus received the Queen Elizabeth II the second Diamond Jubilee Medal. Most recently, Angus received the Community Enrichment Award on National Philanthropy. Angus enjoys and values the time he gets to spend with his family and grandchildren, walking the dog and getting away to the mountains for golf and relaxation. I would like to have a warm welcome for Mr. Angus Watt. Thank you, Angus.
Well, thank you very much, Dustin. And it's a pleasure to be here. And it's even more of a pleasure because I drove through Red Deer last night and I'm in Canmore this morning, this afternoon. So Reg, you're going to be moving the slides for me. So let's go through the next couple pretty quickly and then we'll get started. We're coming with the slides. Perfect. All right, so it's time to reboot. That's the theory. And just think about it from this standpoint. Do we have the adrenaline today that we had back in the end of March and April and May and June? The answer to the question is no, and not in most cases. Let's go to the next. We'll skip to the next one is a disclaimer for the lawyers. This is a little bit about an ad for the Angus Watt Advisory Group. You know, we work on trust, clarity, and heart, and we're wealth management advisors. So let's get, the most important point is on the next slide. And actually every slide, because we don't have a lot here, one of the things I want you to keep in mind is that interest rates are going to, short-term interest rates, even though we saw that the 5-year mortgage rates moved up by 0.25% last Friday, is that short-term interest rates are going to stay low for a long period of time. time. Back in 2008, 2009, this is the Federal Reserve that we circled, the little red dot. You can see for about 6 years, even though interest rates and the economy was back on track, the Federal Reserve kept interest rates low at 1/4%. That's where they are right now. And we would expect the central banks around the world to keep the short-term rates low on a go-forward basis. And that doesn't mean that interest rates can't go higher. Just understand that short-term overnight rates are going to stay low. Next. So when we take a look, now this is in the US, and it was same thing in Canada. The US, the 30-year mortgage rates are at the lowest level they've ever been at in my lifetime, at 2.71%. And we have seen the 10-year bonds move from Christmas time to about 0.9% in yield to about as high as 1.5% last week. Today they're trading about 1.44%. So rates have moved higher, but mortgage rates are still very, very low on a historical basis, both in Canada and the United States and generally around the world. So let's go to the next one. The other thing to keep in mind is that rates can't stay low forever. And when we take a look at this, our inflation expectation right now in North America is about 2.3%. We're talking about the balance of this year and next year, GDP growth rates anywhere from 5 to 6 to 7%. We can't have that inflation rate. We can't have the retail sales we have, you would think, without some type of inflation. And yet interest rates are still very low. So this is a negative interest rates that we're in at this point in time in North America, both in Canada and the United States. And that's just another reason to fuel the equity market, the stock markets, to go higher, along with other price inflation. The next slide is one of my favorites. Todd historically has some pictures, so I brought a picture here. If you can't read it, I'm taking you to a magical never land that is unaffected by the world by events in the real world. And the little kid with his teddy bear says, "Hey, you're taking me to Wall Street?" And that's sometimes what it feels like, is there's a big disconnect. But let's continue and take a look and see what's going to happen to us and what we need to do. David Dodge is an old friend of ours out here in Alberta, and he's with Bennett Jones now. He had his year-end speech December the 8th when he gave it on a global basis. One of the things I found most interesting is he talked about vaccines at that point in time being our source of hope. And we can see it in the marketplace today. The vaccines we now know as of earlier this week is that the President of the United States feels that every American that wants it will have the vaccine by the end of May. That gives us hopefully a green light for us here in Canada that we'll start to receive it. He also went on and talked about the uncertain political ability to execute. We'll talk about this at the end. It doesn't matter what political party you're in, where you are in the world, it seems absolutely challenging is an understatement, trying to get the world back on track and people to follow their leaders. And then we take a look at Jerome Powell, and David Dodge was saying, he says, there's no return to normal. And this is when people say, when are we going to be back to normal? We're not going to be back to normal. If we take a look at the changes we've made in the end of March and April and May and June in technology, we jumped 2 years ahead. So when I take a look, and what David Dodge's message was that day back in the early part of December is it's time to reboot. Now, he was talking about businesses need to reboot. We need to get a new mindset. I would say we have to get the adrenaline pumping. But I would also add, not just in business, but personally and in our community, we have to stop, remove ourselves, and start thinking, how do we get ourselves to reboot? So let's go to our next slide. When we take a look at rebooting in our community in Alberta, you know, everybody is depressed and everybody's tired right now. So if you feel that way, you may say, I don't feel depressed, but you're tired, and it's just every day runs into be the same type of day as the last day. One of the things to keep in mind when we take a look at the housing costs in other cities such as Toronto, the Greater Toronto Area, and in Vancouver, we know that we've got some of the most affordable housing in the world, or certainly in North America, right here in Alberta. We also know we have world-class research, whether it be in artificial intelligence. At U of A, we were #2 in mechanical for a period of time. On the medical, the technology, the energy, we have a Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Houghton, who discovered the hepatitis C virus. He just received that. And that's the type of people and the research that we have in our community. We just don't seem to recognize it, in my mind, well enough. And take a look at what's happening down in Olds, you know, with a strong agricultural community that's all technology driven. Ols is doing great inroads on new technology in the farming industry. We have an educated workforce, skilled labor. We have low taxes, no PST, no Alberta healthcare premiums. We have airport capacity, especially in Edmonton. We have cheap fuel. And we also have a safe and diversified culture, whether you be in Edmonton or Red Deer or wherever you might be, versus other parts of the world. It's really strong. And having new Canadians, and we've got some of the best educated new citizens coming into Canada. Right now, it hasn't happened so much in 2020 and 2021 because of the virus, but it is a challenge. But let's take a look at our budget, okay? And what do we focus on? And not just ourselves, but the community. You know, this is a message that the province, when I read the budget, this is the message that they wanted us to have and wanted us to see. No tax increases, improve the healthcare of Albertans, including reducing wait times, reduce the red tape, look for incentives to support new investments, including an office to promote the environmental, social, and governance, ESG. And Alberta's expected. So those are the things they wanted to talk about. Those are things that we want, I would think. And the challenge they have is their revenues coming in $42.7 billion. We're spending right now $55 billion. So everybody has a wish list, so they like to spend more money. But we've got to keep this in mind. But we're not focusing on the fact that we don't have tax increases, affordable housing, and everything else. So my last slide is what? We need to understand the benefits of what we have. We have to understand that we need to reboot ourselves in our community and ourselves, and we need to support Alberta. And I'm not talking about the Alberta government. We need to support our province the way we did when I first moved here 40 some years ago. You couldn't tell an Albertan no for any reason at all. So what I want to leave you with is this, is that in your personal lives, in your business, in Red Deer, in Alberta, let's focus on getting ourselves rebooted and get the adrenaline pumping. That would be my message to us today.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mr. Watt. Again, just a reminder for the group, we'll open up a Q&A period at the end of all the presentations. So thank you again for those insights. If you do have any questions, we'll save those until the end. Our next speaker I'd like to introduce Mr. Todd Hirsch. Todd Hirsch is the Vice President and Chief Economist for ATB Financial. He holds degrees in economics from the University of Alberta and the University of Calgary. For over 20 years, he's worked as an economist at numerous organizations, including the Canada West Foundation and the Bank of Canada. He's also the author of 3 books. His latest, Spiders in Space, Successfully Adapting to Unwanted Change, was released in 2017. Todd is a strong advocate for the arts and culture community. He is the board chair of the Calgary Arts Academy and is on the boards of the Glenbow Museum and Alberta Ballet. If everybody could please welcome Mr. Todd Hirsch.
Well, thank you so much, Dustin, for that kind introduction. And thank you for inviting me to be part of the Red Deer Chamber event this afternoon. Would be wonderful to be with you in Red Deer in person, as I have on so many other occasions in the past. But in these COVID days, this is what we're all doing on the webinars. So I thank you for having me part of the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if that is okay, Dustin. Yes. And I have just a few slides that I want to share with you. The first slide, before I get to my forecast for where I see Alberta's economy going in 2021, is I like this metaphor to talk about the economy, a 4-layer sponge cake. Often when we think about that term, the economy, we think about one specific layer of this cake. But I want to suggest, in fact, there are 4 distinct layers to the cake, and they are all equally important. And when we think about the stability of our economy, just like the stability of this layer cake, we need to ensure that all layers of that economy are in good shape. So what are the 4 levels? Very quickly, the top layer, the one that with all that nice fresh fruit that attracts all our attention, that's the one we see first of all. That is the market economy, also known as the private sector. That is the tech sector, financial markets, resource extraction like oil and gas, real estate, entertainment, personal services, agriculture. Basically everything in our capitalist profit-motivated system that exists in the market economy. And this is the one for most of us, when we think about the economy, this is where our mind goes to. But it's not the only layer of the economic cake. Underneath that, we have what we call the non-market economy, also known as the public sector. Here we have a variety of things that economists call public goods. And they're essential for the good operating of an economy, but they tend to be underinvested if left to the private sector because it's pretty difficult to make some money on some of these things. So collectively, we agree to produce these things through our governments. Things like infrastructure, public education, our system of post-secondary education, universities and colleges, roads, public transportation, aspects of the arts and culture, healthcare, parks, fire, police, the list goes on and on. Now, there's lots of room for interesting debate and discussion as to exactly how much of these things do we need and how do we fund these things. That fascinating field of economics called public finance, where there's no end of differing ideas and opinions. But I think everyone agrees the non-market economy, these public goods, need to be in place. Underneath that is a layer that I think gets forgotten about most of the time. But I'm hopeful that during COVID, every one of us is coming to a deeper appreciation for, and that is the social economy, also known as the community. This is where our network of family and friends lives. This is volunteerism, public health and mental wellness. And here we can talk about something like the coronavirus eroding public health and mental wellness. Faith communities, charities, altruism, social organizations, basically everything we do as human beings that is not profit motivated and is not delivered by government. This is the social economy. Very important that it be healthy and in balance. And then the final level of the economy, but certainly not the least important, the natural environment, also known as planet Earth. This is where we would see our fresh air that we breathe, the water that we drink, oceans, soil, forests and trees, land use, carbon sinks. And of course, here we can talk about climate change and the challenges with greenhouse gas emissions and pollution. The natural environment, sitting there at the bottom, is absolutely fundamental to everything else that lives on top. But when we think about these four distinct layers of the economy, there can be some tensions and at times some debate as to which ones we should be emphasizing. But I would want to suggest we can rank these things in order of foundation. And I'm using foundation in quotation marks because I don't want to use the word importance. I don't think we're going to get anywhere if we argue and debate about which level is most important, because every single level of that economic cake is equally important. However, we can rank them in order of foundation, and it stacks up like this, with the natural environment being absolutely foundational to everything else on top, the community on top of that, and then the non-market and market economies at the very top. Now, that market economy, that orange box, the private sector, you'll notice it's the smallest box, but it is certainly not the least important box. It's only at the top of this pyramid because it is not as foundational to the levels below it. The way I like the metaphor I like to think about here, the Amazon River in Brazil does not need Amazon.com to be healthy and in good shape. But Amazon.com certainly needs the Amazon River, or maybe more broadly, a healthy planet, for Amazon.com to operate. So there is a distinct order of foundation. However, when we debate these things in policy, sometimes our priorities look like this, with the market economy taking absolute top priority. And I think it's natural and perfectly understandable why we would do this. Most of us, we live and work and play and derive our income in that market economy. In a lot of ways, it touches most closely to home for us. So when we think about how do we prioritize our policies, it's absolutely understandable that we would want to prioritize the market economy above everything else. However, if our priorities become too skewed in this direction, this inverted pyramid, that economic cake is going to become unstable. A lot of you no doubt are fans of the TV show Cake Wars, which is this fun sort of game show or contest show on one of the food networks where these cake artists, they have to build these elaborate tall cakes. And half the fun in watching the show is that the cakes usually become so tall that at a certain point they lose stability and sometimes they fall over. And if they topple over, invariably it's because not enough attention was paid to the base, to the foundational layers at the bottom. So I think this cake tool is a useful way to think about Alberta. It's a useful way to think about the Canadian economy. As we move through COVID and eventually past COVID, there are going to be a lot of challenges that we face and a lot of rethinking and a lot of tensions between these different layers of the cake, especially between the social economy, things like post-pandemic health, and the market economy, and also the tensions between the natural environment, which is usually wrapped up in debates and discussions around climate change, and the market economy. Doesn't mean that this cake metaphor provides all the answers, but I think it's a useful framework for us to, a useful tool for us to use as we think about our economy. And just to wrap up, some forecasts for 2021. What does my economics team at ATB Financial think we are going to see in the province this year? Well, we do think growth is going to resume in Alberta, probably around 4% real GDP growth this year. And if we do see 4% GDP, that will actually be one of the fastest rates of growth the province has seen in 7 years. So that's not too bad. But in context, 4% growth gets us about halfway out of the hole that we dug in 2020 with a recession. We don't have the final numbers in, but a recession which saw Alberta's economy contract between 7 and 8% is our estimate. So 4% rebound sounds good, but by the end of 2021, we are still going to be a smaller economy than we were pre-pandemic. And the growth, the reopening of the economy, of course, we don't know. There are a lot of variables, but the timing will have to do with the vaccine rollout. And there we have a lot of questions about the timing and coverage. We're finding out in real time here in Canada just how complicated it is getting an entire planet vaccinated. I think a lot of Canadians have been maybe a little disappointed or demoralized with the speed at which the vaccine was rolling out here in Canada. But it does seem like in the last week or so, we're rapidly catching up. So I'm hopeful that the vaccine rollout and the coverage, the number of people who are willing to receive the vaccine, will arrive in a timely manner, and that will precipitate then the reopening of the economy. Our guess is, and it's only a guess, that we will see a gradual reopening sometime this spring or summer, and not a full reopening of the economy, probably delayed until the fourth quarter of this year, and it might even be January. We'll just have to watch and wait and see how the numbers of hospitalizations look. The jobless rate is going to remain high, and this is the tough part of the conversation. Our unemployment rate provincially, the official unemployment rate, still above 10%, and we expect it to hang out around 10% in 2021. But here we can think about a K-shaped recovery, and this is one of the real challenges for Alberta and for Canada. The K-shaped recovery means that for some workers, there is going to be a strong recovery. In other words, the up part of the letter K. It is going to feel like the roaring 20s for a lot of workers whose income has not been disrupted during COVID, whose jobs have not been lost. And in fact, a lot of these workers, they've amassed a lot of savings, and they are going to be in a good mood spending when the economy reopens. These workers tend to be the highest paid workers in the province already. They tend to be knowledge workers, professional occupations, basically all of those workers who can, quote, work from home, which is only about 25 or 30% of the Canadian workforce. So for some workers, it is going to be a strong recovery. It's going to be happy days are here again. However, for a whole other group of workers, it is going to be a decided non-recovery. This is the downside of the K. These are workers predominantly in the service sector. These are workers who tend to be lower skill set, predominantly women and new Canadians. These are workers that tend to work part-time. They're also the ones that depended most heavily on the government income support programs in 2020 and now in 21. The challenge they're going to face is as those government income support programs are winded down, timed with the reopening of the economy. They are going to lose that government income support, but the companies or the businesses that had previously employed them are going to fail to reopen, a lot of them. It's going to leave these workers in quite a difficult situation with no income support, no job, and likely not a lot of prospects for jobs. So this K-shaped recovery, we could see a widening of that income disparity, the gap between the wealthy and the not wealthy. And that is, I think, will pose some challenge for us as a province and us as a country that we'll have to pay attention to. The energy sector will stabilize. In fact, we might even see some growth in the energy sector this year. Oil prices are at higher actually than they were pre-COVID, above that $60 US range for the WTI benchmark price, and the Western Canadian price sort of keeping pace. So we might actually see a little bit of encouraging growth. Well, we will see more merger and acquisition activity, which is good for those companies. It will help them keep their costs down and their efficiencies up. But that merger and acquisition activity is going to put even more pressure on the job market. That's precisely why companies merge and acquire each other, is because they can reduce cost by reducing payroll. So it's sort of a good news, bad news story on the merger and acquisitions. But we have to keep in mind the energy sector. Even if we see a nice little encouraging rebound, we're starting at a low level. I mean, ever since June 2014, which is almost 7 years ago, if we can believe that, when oil prices first took that real nasty nosedive, we've seen 6 years plus of contraction, at least in capital spending in our energy sector. In some ways, it's a shadow of what it used to be, and now we're in a rebuilding mode. But we're starting at a low level, but we do see some stability and maybe some growth. But the real good news, and I'll wrap up on this, the real good news is that our economy is going to continue to evolve and adapt. Briefly, I want to share with you 3 sectors where I see the most opportunity for new job creation, new investment in the province, and the sectors that I think will help move the needle on balancing and maybe diversifying our economy. The first, technology and digital sectors. Now, Alberta, we've always had a tech sector, but I think it's fair to say that we are earlier days. We're behind the curve from other locations like Waterloo, Ontario, or Austin, Texas, or Vancouver. But we have seen right through COVID, right through 2020, some really nice growth and new businesses, new companies moving to Alberta, existing tech companies expanding here in Alberta. And I think we will continue to see that throughout 2021 and beyond. The second sector where I see a lot of optimism and growth, agriculture, and especially agri-foods. I've always been a big fan of agriculture in this province. I always say any self-respecting farmer will point out that agriculture has been a base industry in this province long before energy was, and it continues to be a strong base industry. 70% of farm cash receipts continue to be the classics, the traditional, the wheat, the canola, the cattle. But where I'm really excited about new growth is that other 30% of farm cash receipts, where we're seeing a wider variety and a greater diversity of crops and crop products. Things like cannabis, things like chickpeas, quinoa production is doubling almost every single year. Potatoes, I don't know if any of you knew, Alberta has recently surpassed Prince Edward Island and is now Canada's largest potato producing province. And then we can springboard to talk about agri-foods. So that's the food and beverage processing end of it, the manufacturing value-added piece of agriculture, which has been growing very, very nicely over the last couple of decades, had a great year in 2020. The buy local initiatives and appetite for Albertans to buy locally, not only because it's a great product, but also the understanding that we are supporting local businesses. That buy local, I think, is going to continue to power forward. And I think 2021 will be a good year for agri-foods. And finally, renewable energy and clean energy technologies. Now, when we think about renewable energy in Alberta, a lot of people will think about wind turbines and wind power. And certainly that is there. That's not even new industry. First wind farms in Alberta go back 28 years, back to 1993. So wind energy certainly isn't even, it's not a new or emerging, it's kind of a mature renewable energy industry. But I'm more excited about talking about some of these other, for Alberta anyway, newer renewable energy industries, things like geothermal and hydrogen production. Now, these are really in their infancy, so we have to kind of limit our expectation about how much these are going to move the needle on economic diversity. But I do think they represent some really encouraging first steps. Where they go, we don't know, but everything starts in its infancy originally, and I think there's lots of potential to develop geothermal and hydrogen production in Alberta. And then also clean energy technologies, particularly carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We've been a world leader in carbon capture for a long time in Alberta, not only for solving some of the challenges we have here in Alberta, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to start selling these technologies around the world, and maybe particularly to our friends to the south, who with their new president, they're going to be looking very aggressively for some solutions to their challenges around carbon as well. So with that, I will unshare my screen. I hope I didn't take too much time, but I'll turn it back over to you, Dustin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. That was great. We're ahead of schedule, so lots of time. What part of the presentation encouraged a question from Donna? If it's okay, we're going to come back to that question. It sparked a little bit of conversation, so I think that there'll be a good opportunity to put that on the table and have a talk about that. With that, we will move on to our third presenter, Minister Doug Schweitzer. Minister Schweitzer was elected to the Legislative Assembly of Alberta on April 16th, 2019. As MLA for Calgary Elbow, a dedicated husband, father of 2 young girls, and a long-serving community volunteer, Minister Schweitzer has a strong record of public service, including previously raising funds for military families and serving as vice chair of the Calgary Drug Treatment Court. He is passionate about restoring Alberta's promise, an Alberta in which no matter where you came from, if you worked hard, you could succeed. Minister Schweitzer was a partner at a leading Alberta law firm as a restructuring and bankruptcy lawyer. This experience gave him firsthand view of the staggering impacts of failed policies that have led to job losses, economic stagnation, and a loss of hope. Doug Schweitzer was appointed as Alberta's Minister of Jobs, Economy and Innovation on August 25th, 2020. Minister Schweitzer will oversee the implementation of Alberta's recovery plan, its sector strategies, and Alberta's growth agenda. Minister Schweitzer previously held the position of the Alberta's Minister of Justice and Solicitor General, where he made important progress tackling rural crime, advancing aspects of the Fair Deal Panel report recommendations, and creating a faster, fairer, and more responsible justice system. I'd ask everybody to please welcome Minister Schweitzer.
Thank you so much, and I can't wait until we get to the question and answer session, mainly because we have Angus and Todd. I'm really keen to hear their responses to the questions that we have here today. I'll give a brief update on COVID, and then I'm going to jump into our recovery plan and strategy for the future of Alberta from the government perspective. And on the COVID front, I mean, we all know about the spike in cases that we had over the winter. That was a global issue across all of Europe, North America, everywhere that we were dealing with the pandemic. And it's been encouraging. Numbers have come down. Hospitalizations have come down. We're into that step 2 now of our 4-stage reopening plan. On the vaccine front, obviously in February, vaccine nationalism became a real issue, disrupted the supply chain and the stability of that weekly forecast that we were relying on. It does appear as though that has now stabilized here, and we're hopefully the federal government continues to get that supply of vaccine into our country. But it's opened up a discussion, which I'm actually helping to lead the charge on for our government, around a national strategy. What role does Alberta have to play in domestic production of vaccines, pharmaceuticals, and other parts that we rely on from a health perspective? It's one thing when it comes to, we know what we need this from a food security, you need this from a national security perspective. That's why we invest in the military. But it's really caused a reshaping of our priorities when it comes to health security. We never want to be put in a position like this again as a province or a country. And we're taking a look right now as to what we can build on. And Angus highlighted this earlier on. Like, most of us don't know that at the University of Alberta, we literally have a Nobel Prize winner in virology, which helps develop vaccines and drugs and other things that are in that space. We have 2 companies right now that are already into human trials when it comes to COVID vaccines. And these vaccines are cutting edge with the mRNA and DNA based. So really, we have the building blocks here in Alberta to help be part of that national solution, as well as an international solution when it comes to situations like COVID-19. Hopefully, we never get into another one of these pandemics for a long time. It kind of seemed to be 1 in 100-year situation, but we want to make sure that we're ready and position Alberta in case it does arise again, or in case there's a variant that we have to respond to. So that's one project that we're working on there. One other thing I just want to highlight is that we got 3 vaccines now approved in Canada. There appears as though there's likely going to be a 4th one approved in the coming weeks. That would hopefully as well speeds up the timeline that we've had. We've just seen that the Americans have expedited what their forecast is until when they'll have sufficient vaccines for everyone to May. There's a significant amount of manufacturing capacity in the United States that has not been able to ship a lot of their product into Canada. Once the Americans have enough of their vaccine, we anticipate that the purchase contracts that Canada has would likely accelerate as well. We're also exploring, and right now there's real-time discussions going on right now about the time between vaccines. A lot of these vaccines are 2-dose vaccines. Right now, we're exploring to extend that out to upwards of 4 months, 90 days at plus. So we're taking a look at that, which again would accelerate the ability to get the first shot to Albertans and Canadians across the country, which would accelerate reopening as well. The stats of Israel, other countries have been encouraging on that front. So, whereas a couple of months ago there was a lot of anxiety around this, I do think that there's a little bit more optimism now on the vaccines, and hopefully we can accelerate our efforts there. We can all point fingers at lots of different places, but there does appear to be a little bit more stability on that front. But it doesn't mean that we can't learn from this and build on it to make sure those same challenges don't happen again. I'm going to now pivot and get into our recovery plan. So the way I talk to people is that I think I got the best job in government right now. So I get to think about where we're going, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. How do we position Alberta for success? And there's 3 foundational pillars for our strategy. One of them is to making sure we have the lowest taxes possible. So we accelerated our job creation tax cut, brought our corporate taxes down to 8%. We're now the lowest corporate tax jurisdiction in Canada by a country mile. If President Biden goes ahead with his strategy on taxes, we'll probably be one of the lowest jurisdictions in all of North America. There might be 1 or 2 states in the US with lower corporate taxes. So we want to make sure we have that tax advantages to attract investment, create jobs here in Alberta. The second pillar is efficient government. So, the last 4 or 5 years have been bumpy, and Todd can give you all the rundowns on that. He already has. Last 4 or 5 years have been bumpy on the economy. But for the decades before that, we had it pretty good in Alberta, and our spending got out of line with the rest of the country. So this budget that we put forward right now gets our spending down to the big 4 provinces average in this first term. So fiscal restraint and making sure that we're efficient in government has been key. We're still spending a record amount in health in response to this. We're still spending as well with contingency funds on COVID. There's $1.2 billion contingency fund to deal with the pandemic on the health side. There's $500 million there on the economy as well, and the contingency fund for our recovery plan driven initiatives and supporting businesses. So we know we have to spend now for the future. Also, the largest capital investments or largest capital plan in Alberta's history, getting our roads and infrastructure built now to stimulate that growth. So that's a big part of our plan right now, is getting efficient government, but also investing in our recovery in the near term without impacting our long-term operational budget. So that's the key part of it. Don't impact the long-term operations so we can get back to balance in the next term. Next part as well in the efficient government is making sure that we have reduced red tape. So we've committed to reducing that friction on business by 1/3. And in the first year alone, we went from a failing grade by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business to one of the top grades in the country. And we've saved businesses estimated about $500 million, from those extra costs that just basically inefficient regulation can cause. So that's another big focus of ours, to continue down that path to make sure Alberta has an efficient government that can help stimulate investment and growth here in our province. And then the third pillar is talent, making sure that we're producing the talent that's needed for jobs of today and tomorrow. If we have time, I'll probably do it more in the Q&A session, just because I know I have some limited scope. I can talk for about an hour on this topic. So talent is a big key as well, making sure we have talent for the job market that's evolving and the job opportunities that we're seeing. A lot of this is around the tech space that Todd mentioned. We're seeing huge growth in the tech space as well. So then when you take a look at the opportunities, we're also developing out strategies for sectors from everything from energy, agriculture, forestry, technology, tourism, all those different parts of our economy. We're developing out sector strategies for each area of that, and how do we build on it? And the way I look at it, this is an opportunity for us, for the largest diversification effort in my lifetime. And what role can we play as a government to help make sure we have the right framework, the right policies in place for those growth opportunities of the future? And I'm going to start with technology. So last summer, we put in place an innovation capital working group. We noticed that there was some momentum happening in the tech space in particular. We wanted to respond to that, make sure we had the best possible framework. And it came back to us as a recommendation. And we've pretty much implemented all of their recommendations already. And I can break them down. So the Alberta Enterprise Corporation, they wanted us to put an additional $175 million into the Alberta Enterprise Corporation. This is for venture capital to get those fast growing startup companies going. So we've made that investment. And 2019 was a record year for venture capital. 2020 was even better. And the beginning of this year, I mean, there's a daily report on financings that are happening in Alberta, significant financings and growth. And these are real tangible jobs. And I'll give you a couple examples. So you've got a company called Cement. It went from 50 employees a year ago to 250 now. They're forecasted to go over 500 employees in the next year and a bit. We just had another one would be high, fast growing, would be Neo Financial, a financial technology company, hiring hundreds of people right now. The team behind it's this same team that helped build Skip the Dishes. So these are real tangible opportunities that are happening. A lot of it's happening in Calgary and Edmonton, but we even have companies in Red Deer. There's one called Holmetrics, which is actually in the paper today, which is, again, a technology-driven company that is looking at raising capital and having success in that. So we're seeing as well a willingness in the private sector to invest more. So we've had people in Alberta that have done well. Historically, they've invested in energy or agricultural products, but now they're also looking at investing in technology and we're leveraging venture capital to get that done. We also noticed that we had to make sure we were efficient on our tax credit side. So we brought in place the Innovation Employment Grant, which helps fund startups, research and development, up to 20% of the cost of research and development, built off of similar eligibility criteria to SHRED. So that's as well has been really competitive. That started up in January as well in Alberta. So we're seeing momentum. And you may have seen yesterday, one of the largest international technology companies called Infosys just opened up or announced that it's opening up an office in Calgary. They're going to be hiring 500 people in Calgary. So whereas I would say 2-3 years ago, if you said technology is going to be an economic driver, it's going to be a job creator in Alberta, people might kind of look to you and say, oh, that's cute. There's a ball, go bounce that in the corner. Whereas now this is a real tangible play where you have proof points on the ground in lots of different markets. And I'd say the three that are kind of the hottest ones that we're seeing is fintech, financial technology. That's huge. Agricultural technology and the applications that go into agriculture. There's a whole bunch of different areas there. If you ever get a chance, go to Olds College, check out their field, the farmer's field that they have there. We're doing research and development. They literally have a tractor drone that's almost the size of a house. That's automated. They're using artificial intelligence, machine learning. And then the third one that we're seeing a lot of momentum on, and Todd's already commented on, this is around clean technology, hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, all the different pieces that go into that marketplace. And there's huge opportunities for growth in clean technology. I could keep going on a whole bunch of them. I'm going to kind of pick and choose, and then hopefully we can get into other areas in our Q&A. Another big part of our strategy is around mines and minerals. So we had it so good in Alberta for so long that we didn't even scratch the surface on what other mineral opportunities there were in Alberta. And right now with the emerging markets around electrical vehicles and batteries and different types of products that are being generated, we have a need for different minerals that we have right here in Alberta. So lithium, nickel, all of these different things we can produce. And there's some really innovative companies in Alberta that are doing just that. And taking a look at how do they get further products out of the oil sands? How do they get further products out of our existing wells? How do they get it out of kind of byproducts of our traditional energy sector? And they're having amazing success in raising capital and finding different applications for our existing infrastructure that we have. We've also launched our natural gas strategy. This involves hydrogen, involves petrochemicals, involves recycling. This is the one thing on recycling that's actually really exciting. Never would have thought recycling could be an economic driver, but it can. The time of us just taking our recycling products and shipping them overseas and not really thinking about it, that is kind of gone. So we have to think through how are we going to recycle going forward? And there's a role to play in Alberta. We have expertise, we have infrastructure that can be leveraged there. Then there's also LNG. LNG is still a big opportunity for us in Alberta to grow for the future. And then one last topic I'll cover off is agriculture. And I agree completely with Todd's observation on agriculture. This is an area where we're seeing huge international interest. I had a call recently with the Chamber of Commerce from India, and they were asking me about opportunities for whiskey, opportunities for different products, and it's just a whole bunch of export market opportunities here in agriculture. And we're working with Minister Dreeshen, Central Alberta MLA, who's our Minister of Agriculture, to help build out our strategy on ag. And on that front there, we've made one of the largest investments in infrastructure for ag in a long time, where we announced $800 million in partnership with the local irrigation district, as well as the Canada Infrastructure Bank, to irrigate 200,000 acres in southern Alberta. And that's just going to create higher value products, greater opportunities for food production, other things that go along with it. But we're not done there. We'd like to do more. So if there's irrigation districts on here, or if there's other partners out here that are interested in the ag space, we want to do more. There's further opportunities to build out our agricultural infrastructure across Alberta, better utilize our water, and make sure that we get those higher value products here in our province. So I'm going to stop there because I could keep going. There's a whole bunch of other topics I didn't get into, from tourism to film and television. By the way, we're having our best year in 20 years in film and television. It was treated like an arts kind of side grant. We're now having strategic calls with HBO, Disney, Netflix on a regular basis to make sure we get the utilized tax credit structure for film in the most efficient way to get television series into Alberta. We've got 5 significant television series right now, and we're hoping to get 2 more, which at that point in time, we're going to have to start growing the number of people working in film and television in our province. So it's encouraging. There's a whole bunch of stuff on tourism we're planning for the long term. We need to get through COVID really to see the results of that. But I'll stop there, and really looking forward to the question and answer session.
That's great. Thank you so much, Minister Schweitzer. That sounds really exciting. We do have some really awesome questions that have come up. I am going to, we'll kind of go in order. I'm going to go back to the first comment, and Donna, I'm actually going to pass this over to you. Some of the questions I'll read, but this one was directed at Todd's presentation with regards to the foundation and the different layers of the market. So Donna, if you're able to, would you like to speak a little bit more to your question to clarify?
It actually wasn't a question, because I saw that we're going to have questions and answers later. It was just a chat. And so all I was saying was on the cake, I thought that I agree. I agreed with the foundation, the first and second layer, but I was just saying the third and fourth had the market too small on that depiction, because of course we're the people that pay the taxes that enable the layer below. That was just a chat thing. But I would like to have other people talk first, and then I may have a question later.
Sounds good.
Well,
thanks so much, Donna.
Oh,
go ahead, Todd.
Donna, it's an excellent observation, and for sure there are interdependencies between a lot of those layers, especially the market and non-market economy. We need a tax base in order to pay and finance those things. But I would still argue things like education, things like infrastructure. Businesses would come to Alberta because there is infrastructure, because there is an educated workforce, because we have, a healthcare system. All of those things are more foundational. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We need a strong market economy in order to pay for it. So again, I don't want us to think about which is more important, because I would say we need all 4 of them in harmony. But
I just would have drawn it bigger. I'm just saying, because we came from out east and we came for, a job. But yes, we did check on all the other things too.
Yeah, but the business that you came to is probably here because of infrastructure, because of schools, educated people. But it's a really great point that you raise.
Just staying on the same topic, Todd, while we have you, there's a comment. What happened in Texas with the winter storm speaks volumes when you prioritize market with no regard for the other foundational aspects. This sparked some conversation. I'm just going to open the floor for a few comments for a moment. Gord, I'll give you one chance to speak if you want. I'm just playing.
You want me to talk about this or ask a question or what?
Well, whatever you like.
Well, the Texas issue, it's not a market issue. I think if you do some bigger research, it was a letdown of there's a bunch of things, including just a rapid expansion of the Texas economy that the grid couldn't keep up with. And if there was a market, it was a market distortion in wind and renewable powers. But my question to the three guests is, the one thing that has been mentioned in this hour, and it's the elephant in the room, it dwarfs every other little project you want to talk about, and that is pipelines and other logistic infrastructure to get our products to market. Not just pipelines anymore, it's rail, it's highway. We do not have the infrastructure to get it out. If those three issues were solved in one way or another, our economic forecast far outstrips 4%. So my question to the three panelists here is, what's your outlook on our actually getting the logistic infrastructure in place to get our products to market? Thank you.
Thanks,
I
Gord.
mean,
Gentlemen.
I can jump in there. I mean, one of the reasons why we stepped in and invested in the Keystone XL pipeline was that we wanted to make sure that we had long-term capacity to get our products out of Alberta. Obviously, it was disappointing when President Biden came in and decided to terminate the permit that we were relying on to get that project built. Right now, we're exploring other potential uses for that infrastructure that has gone in. That there has a lot of pipe has gone into the ground. We're also exploring how do we leverage our trade agreements with the United States and other things for recourse. So that there is one project. TMX, I mean, the reports we're having on TMX is that it's currently, construction's underway, construction's on target. We're going to be, obviously we need that off, taking capacity of TMX, that's critical. So that's a good project that we have. There's lots of live discussion about the state of Michigan and some of the positions that it's taking right now. We're working with our, federal counterparts and provincial counterparts on that file to continue to have those pipelines be operational and expanded as planned. So right now, with those projects that are in place, obviously we may need some further rail capacity down the line, but once we get TMX in place, it should help alleviate at least our near-term pressures that we have. And also considering that we'll get hopefully the stability in line 3 and line 5. I'm not sure if Todd or Angus give other further thoughts on this, but those are kind of my initial observations on it.
Well, the only thing I would add really quickly to the conversation about pipelines, and maybe it gets to the broader question about infrastructure, how do we get these things out? This is a great example of the layers of the cake and how infrastructure, which is in that non-market piece of it, things like road infrastructure and highways. And I think of also broadband internet access, expanding that throughout the province. A lot of rural parts of the province are still lacking broadband, and we can't really fully have an economic recovery that benefits everyone in Alberta. And I think in the 21st century, broadband access is really what the 20th century was to the highway system. So I agree with the comments, and I think there's lots of opportunities to expand that yet.
Oh, and building on Todd's thought process there on broadband, I had an opportunity to meet with the lead person on the Starlink system for SpaceX. So for people that aren't familiar with the low Earth orbit satellites that are being put up there in the SpaceX program of Starlink, take a look at it. And it's actually has coverage right now into Alberta. They're doing their beta testing right now. It's not going to solve everything. Obviously, it's better if you can have fiber everywhere that you want to go. It is faster. But there are some real opportunities with technologies like low Earth orbit satellites. Minister Glubish, our Minister of Service Alberta, is working in real time on further strategy as part of our recovery around rural broadband. And to Todd's point, if you take a look at some of the highest value companies in Canada, Shopify, they're letting people work wherever they want to work. And if somebody is talented in a small community in Alberta, they should be able to stay there and work for a company like Shopify. And that's a disruptive technology that's come in place during this pandemic. People used to say you had to be on Bay Street to be in banking, and well, Bay Street's been closed for about a year. So people have figured out how to work in other places. So we need to make sure we can facilitate that. And it's not just economic, it's also education, health applications. There's lots of things where broadband is going to be critical long term.
And I just want to add a couple of other points here. Number one, demographically, the world's slowing down, has been slowing down for a long time. And I think after COVID-19, it's going to slow down even faster. Therefore, we're going to have a peak in demand for oil probably in the next 10, 12, 15 years, if not sooner. And then you add another 5, 10 years later and you say, okay, what will the global demand be for oil? Maybe it's 70 to 75 million barrels a day, because the fuel energy that we're using right now just represents 15% of it. So going back to the minister's point, Doug, is that, you know, natural gas and liquid natural gas is really important to this province, and we can get that out, and we have to make sure we get it out. The Trans Mountain's going to help. Both Canadian National Railways and CP, they're having record years. Part of that is in the grain business. You know, like 2020, we had the oil, but right now we got record grain volume being put through. So there will be competition for the lines, no doubt about it. But we're going to find that and with the price of oil, let's say it's not $100, let's say it's $60 a barrel, or $50 to $60 a barrel. The reinvestment in oil, it's kind of tainted at this point in time, and we'll be looking for new sources of energy. So I think if we're exporting 4.5 million barrels a day, that's probably going to be a target ceiling for the province of Alberta. And it's not just because of transportation getting it out. It's just a question, world demand, global demand for it is also going to be reduced as we diversify into different sectors. So I think liquid natural gas, LNG, is going to be the growth component to it. I think Fort McMurray is getting a raw deal right now. That's why with the minister's ESG, we've got to do a better job for that aspect to it. I would love to see people flying out of here or working, you know, going to Vancouver. You know, we've got the affordable housing, we've got the lower taxes. Why can't people work in this province, whether it be in Red Deer or Airdrie or wherever the case may be, or in Olds, and be working for a head office somewhere else in North America? There's no reason in the world that can't occur. And that's why it's so important on a go-forward basis that we keep our PST and keep taxes low, both corporately and on personal taxes. Competitive is maybe the best word to use.
Thank you very much for that. We'll move to another question, and we heard from a few different people about talent in the labor market in Alberta as we continue to grow opportunities in different sectors. We have a question from Councillor Weinchess. We're hearing comments about professionals and skilled workers who are considering leaving Alberta. What can and should we do to prevent brain drain from our province?
You know, I'm going to start here first because I'm probably the least political. And one of the things to keep in mind is that if you had asked me 7-8 years ago, the population of Alberta was 3.7, 3.8 million people, and we're going to have an NDP government, and the price of oil is going to go from $100 down to $50, how many people would be in the province of Alberta, you know, in 5 years? I would have said politely 3.6, hoping that it'd be at least that. We ended up with about 4.3 million, and that's because of immigration. And one of the things that we do in immigration, there's a skills test. We actually have the highest quality of people coming into any country in Canada, and our growth has really come from, most of it has come, I think I forgot the number, but 90% of our growth, new population, is coming from new Canadians, and some of it's interprovincial, and but most of it is coming from new Canadians coming into Canada with a skill set, and they're coming because of our platform, our culture. It's a safe community. We're competitive, and it's looking to expand. And this is something we get to build on, and this is our opportunity. So yes, we'll always, and I've been here 40 some years, and we'll always have a brain drain. When I was in Toronto, people were always leaving Toronto, other people going into Toronto, and same with Quebec and Montreal. We just need to have a place that's attractive and an opportunity for them to be successful here.
And the
one
only
other thing. Oh, go ahead, Todd. Go ahead, Todd.
Just to jump in real quick, I would add that, you know, in the 20th century, people would move where they got a job. In the 21st century, particularly among young people, people will move to where they want to live, and then they'll figure out the job after that. And in considering how technology is enabling people to work wherever they want, for example, I have a young cousin of mine recently moved. He works in the tech sector in Vancouver, but moved back to Edmonton, kept his job in Vancouver, can work remotely very nicely, pay far less for accommodation and living in Edmonton, and enjoys the lifestyle in Edmonton. So we do have to pay attention to things like taxes, but we also, in more than ever, we have to pay attention to the livability of our cities. We have to pay attention to the tone that we are setting as a province. If we're seen as a bunch of, you know, kind of whiny crybabies, And that is sometimes the perception outside of the rest of outside of Alberta. If our tone is positive and forward looking, that is really attractive, especially to young people. That's all I'll say.
And on the talent front as well, and we recognize this, that we have a really well-educated workforce across Alberta. Like we have highly educated geologists, engineers, and hopefully, there's stability in the energy market for long-term stability for them. But there's a lot of them that are actually looking for new opportunities as well. And these people are really smart. You don't become a geologist without being able to do a few equations along the way. So we're looking through we have a Jobs Now program, which we're going to help. It hasn't been launched yet. It's in our budget. We're just finalizing the details to announce it. But we're going to help with retooling and retraining opportunities as well to help alleviate some of that onboarding cost for companies that are fast growing. And we've talked to companies, particularly in the tech sector. They could hire somebody with the relevant experience in Toronto and get them onboarded right away. But they'd rather hire somebody here in Alberta that's really smart, loves the community, wants to be here, wants to be a part of their culture, but it might take them 2 or 3 months to train them and give them the skill set that they need. Not everybody in tech needs to be a coder, just to be clear. There's sometimes a misperception. Not everybody needs to be a coder to be involved in tech. There's sales, there's a whole bunch of pieces that go into it. So with our Jobs Now program, we want to make sure we can help companies with onboarding. There's lots of different growth sectors that we're having in our province, from film to tech to ag, all the things that we've highlighted. And we want to give Albertans that want to have a new skill set the opportunity to get trained. So just that's one other thing I just wanted to add.
Donna, we have a comment. Would you like to jump in now?
Yeah, I did. I agree completely with being optimistic and us having a very well-trained labor force. My specific concern is not brain drain from Alberta, and I do appreciate all the very educated immigrants that we have coming in, because I have hired some, but I'm saying I'm more concerned about right here in Red Deer. So I was really disappointed to hear that we're not going to have our university, we're going to have our polytechnic or whatever. And I just want to make sure on that front that, Red Deer, and Central Alberta are right on this tech bandwagon, because I agree with you completely. I've designed my office to be a digital office, and I agree with where we're going on the tech front. But I think that in terms of Alberta, I want to make sure that if we're not getting our university, we're going to get a lot of focus on getting tech, whether it's in agriculture, renewable energy, or any other kinds of skill set. And the other area is so I'm a lawyer, so we've spent 93 million, or we have 93 million in the budget for the courthouse. So I want to make sure that's going to be the top in tech, because I know between the Calgary and the Edmonton courthouse, Calgary has a new courthouse, Edmonton has an old courthouse, and I think the filing differences and delays are huge between the two courts. So I just want to make sure that Red Deer is the center of tech as well, not the brain drain to Calgary and Edmonton.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And when I was Minister of Justice, obviously we had the final green light to proceed with the Red Deer courthouse. And the one thing just to highlight as well, when I went back to talking about efficient government, we were still using fax filing in Alberta for legal documents. Like, my kids wouldn't even know what a fax machine looks like. They'd be like, "Daddy, what is that thing?" They would probably think it was just a printer. So the fact that we're eliminating fax filing, we're going to online, we're digitizing a lot of applications. In some of our courthouses in Alberta, literally, like the architecture of the buildings couldn't handle the amount of paper that was there. They actually had to limit what was being done on floors because of the paper system that we had. They took me on a tour of the Edmonton courthouse, and like they literally have to shield documentation from 100 years ago from potential water and everything, and potential if the sprinkler system broke. Like, we have to modernize a lot of our processes in government. And I do think as well from opportunities for technology, earlier comment around broadband access. I know broadband wouldn't be as much of an issue for Red Deer proper, but for surrounding communities in Central Alberta, broadband can be a challenge. So making sure we build up those capacities.
One of my staff is remote. So we've got to have that infrastructure. I mean, I completely agree with Todd. I was just saying that top thing should just be bigger on the market. But, we really have an ability here, because Red Deer itself, not just Alberta, has so many excellent, wise people. And so I just don't want us to be missed out of the loop. And I think in government too, I wanted to ask you about that, but maybe this is more for Minister Glubish, is that You know, like when I went to go, I had to go in person with my mask off to renew my driver's license. And I'm thinking, like, you're exposing me to coronavirus. And the other thing is, I wanted to use digital signatures on some things. And then, you know, I have to have my clients come in to sign things. So I'm saying you could really facilitate us. And I know you're working on it, but I just, you know, I mean, I commend that I know you have the Digital Innovation Office. I know that you have Justice Digital, but just really sort of facilitating that, doing a business in Alberta on that front.
And when it comes to the technology, I think it was Angus made the point that, you know, we've kind of leaped 2-3 years in technology adaptation during this pandemic. And just to kind of point to that, like our Court of Appeal judges, so these are our most senior level of court in Alberta. Yeah, originally I was like, oh my goodness, are these guys going to do like, are they going to do video hearings? Like, are they actually going to buy into this? And like, you know, Chief Justice Fraser was on it. Like, she's like, no, we're going to have everybody with a workstation at home. We're going to get video brought into this. And they did it. Like our court system and judges who I thought would be the most resistant to change have embraced it. So I do think that we really have seen that breakthrough opportunity here. And yeah, we'll look for further ways to change it. I know the Law Society, again, another one of those institutions that doesn't like to change very quickly. They are all over change as well. So hopefully we can keep that momentum going.
Great. I'm going to move to, we'll try and capture two questions in a conversation that we'll open up. One's from Andrew Weeb and then the other's from Connor Couples. I'll read Connor's question because Andrew's question was about inflation as well. Connor says, or asks, with spending happening all over the world due to COVID, there is a threat of inflation. Does Alberta have a strategy in place for the possibility of cryptocurrency adoption?
So when it comes to cryptocurrency adoption, nothing immediate there. I think probably the biggest change in cryptocurrency, I think it was Tesla recently was buying a bunch of Bitcoin stock or Bitcoins as well. We are working towards a fintech or financial technology strategy. Look for that to be announced. It was in our business plan in the budget is to make sure we can keep up with fintech and securities changes that are happening as well. A lot of our structures were set up for 20 years ago. It goes to my points around the legal system as well, but a lot of our financial structures, how we can raise capital for companies through securities regulations have been based off of a very historic structure. And we need to be able to keep up with a lot of these changing systems that are out there. So that is on our agenda to make sure that we can get advice. A lot of that advice though doesn't exist. The ability to get that advice doesn't exist in government. It's an institution that wasn't set up for that disruptive technology that's coming on. So we will have to go outside to get advice to allow us to figure out a framework to foster and grow fintech technologies and applications in Alberta.
Thank you, Minister Schweitzer. Todd or Angus, do you have any further comments on that?
No, nothing for me.
I just think that we confuse Bitcoin sometimes with a currency when it's not a currency. It's more of a commodity. It's not regulated. It's not liquid. And somewhere down the road, we will have digital currency. The financial world's aware of that. And, we go to all these steps to make sure that everybody's paying their fair share of taxes and we know what the liabilities, we can follow the money. And obviously, when we're using something like Bitcoin, we can't. And so there will be changes, and one day you're going to wake up and find out these are the new changes, and everybody will be going, wow. And then we'll just have to see. But what's happening right now isn't a long-term solution.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have another question from Aina Potts. The first reading for a national guaranteed basic income was passed in the House of Commons last week. If this is eventually implemented, what impact do you think this will have on the economy in Alberta? Businesses and the ability to hire, incentive for businesses to grow, increase to taxes to fund?
Doug, do you want to start?
I think I'll defer to the Economist on this one.
Well, I might
go
start. I might start, and then Angus, I'm sure you have some thoughts on it too. Personally, as an economist, I'm on the fence about a universal basic income. What I like about it is that at least it's bold enough to say we need to set aside the systems of government income support that were established in the 1950s and 1960s for a very, very different world and a very different economy. In the 21st century, we need 21st century solutions and programs of government income support that make sense in the 21st century. If that's a universal basic income or not, I don't know, but at least I like that it's bold enough to say we need to think bigger. One of my hesitations about universal basic income, it's not even so much is it going to cost a lot, because I think we can figure that out, but does it act as a disincentive, especially for young people to work? And I'm of two minds on that too. I actually don't know. I think you would have to set it low enough that it is not a disincentive, that it does not encourage young people coming out of high school just to, give up all ambition and say, well, I'm just going to go on my universal basic income and not even try. If that happened, I think it would be, disastrous and a crisis. But if you set it low enough that young people would have to say, well, I could go on my universal basic income, but I'm never going to go on a vacation. I'm never going to get to go skiing. I'm never going to, get to do things that young people like to do. I have to find a career. I have to find work. So I don't know. I mean, that's a long way of saying I don't know about a universal basic income, but I don't think we should be so quick to just shut it down and say, never speak of that again. Now, Angus, I'd love your thoughts.
Well, strangely, Todd, I think you're right. And I think that we're much more open to it today. I take a look at, healthcare, or from the standpoint of mental health, is a challenge for us today. So if we had it universal and it was low, we've got a lot of people that are stressed out in the workplace that would choose not, maybe they would choose not to work, certainly on a short-term basis. I think daycare is the other aspect. We've got a very high divorce rate in our society today. We do in Alberta. And if we want to make sure that we have equality and everybody participating and everybody develop their careers, then we have to come back and ask the question on daycare too, because to be spending $2,200 or $2,500 a month on one child, and then if you have two children, the cost of that, and how would you do that if you had a price of a home that was a lot more expensive? So we're just putting so much pressure on these people. So I think you're right in your basic statement, is that we have to look at everything again with a fresh. That's what, we talked about getting rebooted. We want to get our economy rebooted. These are some of the things we got to look at and take a look at them and say, you know what, maybe we can afford that. If we had a bigger, stronger economy, we'd have more money. If we had more money, there's more things we could do. These people are going to add value to our economy, and instead of the problems we have with the homeless. So I think we have to kind of seriously come back and take a look at it. I think you're right, Todd.
Thank you very much. As we near the end, we'll take one more question. We have a question from Bree Fitzpatrick with the City of Red Deer. Can you share how we can best be involved as the Invest Alberta Corporation grows and develops future investment opportunities?
Oh, I mean, Invest Alberta, and just for background for everyone, Invest Alberta is a brand new Crown corporation that was set up. It's the business development arm for our province. And it's there as a tool for municipalities, it's there as a tool for businesses across Alberta. You want to attract investment into Alberta, you want to reach markets outside of our province. It is there to be your business development tool. Reach out directly to Invest Alberta. They have their own website. You can engage with them. They've got a whole team of people that they've hired to engage at a whole bunch of different sectors, also at the municipal level. They're there to help develop strategies, help us sell our province. They have data and analytics. They have slide decks for marketing. So yeah, reach out to them. They're a tool for Albertans to use.
Great. Thank you so much, Minister Schweitzer. With that, I would like to thank our speakers very much. Sorry, we just had a note here. We'll give everybody, the speakers, just one more minute to recap or any final closing comments, and then we'll wrap up.
I can jump in. Just want to say a huge thank you to everyone and to all the small business owners and business operators on the Zoom call. I just want to say thank you for your patience during this pandemic. I know it hasn't been an easy year. There is light at the end of the tunnel. I can't wait until we can put the pandemic in our rear view mirror. But again, just say an immense amount of gratitude and thank you to you for keeping your employees healthy, keeping your customers healthy, and everything you've done in the last 12 months.
Thanks. You know, obviously, I like to thank everybody. It's a great opportunity. I love the opportunity of speaking to the people in the Red Deer and the community. I will just say this concept of getting the adrenaline running again is important. That's why I talk about rebooting. And in the last comments, I just like to say that everybody in your family, the workforce that you're in and everything else, just check on them. You know, in the military, we have this follow-up checking in on your buddy because everybody says they're fine, but nobody's sleeping at night, or, you know, they're waking up in the middle of the night and everything else. There's a lot more pressure on all of us than we realize. And just try to be nice. You know, if somebody's not delivering the service as quickly as she can, they're probably short-staffed. I know in the financial industry, we're really short-staffed because people are on layoffs, or not layoffs, but are on short-term disability. So just try to be kind to your neighbors and double check on your friends and your family.
And I'll maybe echo some of Angus's more philosophical comments. Who would have thought economists can talk this way? But, you know, I would encourage all of us, when I talked about the 4 layers of the cake, and I talked about the social economy is the one that is often forgotten or ignored or maybe taken for granted. My hope is that as we move through COVID and eventually past COVID, that every one of us will come to a deeper appreciation for how important community is, how important family and friends are, how important it is that we bolster our volunteerism, social organizations, altruism, charity. All of those things are going to be so critical as Alberta transitions to something new. It's a scary time for a lot of people in the province. We are in a lot of ways grieving an economy that is behind us, but we have to look forward to building a new economy. And it's going to be a strong economy, but that social economy layer of the cake, absolutely important. So let's not forget the lessons we're learning during COVID.
Well said.
Awesome. Thank you so much. To wrap, I would like to thank our speakers again, Mr. Angus Watt, Mr. Todd Hirsch, and Minister Doug Schweitzer. Thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you to Eat Catering for providing the food for those of you that ordered. Thank you so much for everybody taking the time to join this call. We miss seeing you and interacting and networking with you, and we look forward to the time that we can do so in person. Thank you very much to the Red Deer and District Chamber of Commerce for hosting this call, and I hope that everybody takes care and has a great afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.